What if you had a water buffalo like everybody's got, but you couldn't find your hairbrush? And your Swiss veterinarian wouldn't stop yodeling while you sang love songs to your cheeseburger? And then to jump universes, what if you found two salt-preserved squirrels in a cave by the Dead Sea and tried to sneak them home, but then they came back to life and told you about first century and Jesus' ministry? One man has helped create all of this faith-based lesson-teaching lunacy, and he is our guest today on Fantastical Truth. Welcome anew to Fantastical Truth, the podcast from Lorehaven.com, in which we explore fantastical stories for God's glory and apply their meanings to the real world Jesus calls us to serve. I'm E. Stephen Burnett, co-host number 1. I publish Lorehaven.com. I also helped co-author the nonfiction book about fiction called The Pop Culture Parent.
And I'm Zackary Russell, and I do not have a water buffalo, so I would like to speak to the manager, please. And this is episode 113. What if you learn Bible lessons from singing Veggies and Dead Sea Squirrels? And we'll have a special guest, Mike Nawrocki.
Mike Nawrocki is the co-creator of Veggietales and also the creator of the Dead Sea Squirrels, which started life as a middle grade series. It's been very popular at the Realm Makers bookstore, one of our top sellers when I was with Realm Makers in Pigeon Forge just a couple of weekends ago. And Mike will actually be at the booth himself to sign copies and talk Veggies and Squirrels with many thousands of adoring homeschool family fans.
Well, this is going to be great, Stephen, to talk to Mike. During the pandemic, when we were doing, virtual church and whatnot, our church would put together a kids program every morning for our younger kids. But then at some point they stopped that because we went back to, in-person church. And then there was a time where we were still at home, or maybe we would go back, but then one week we'd all get sick with something else, just normal sickness. And so our kids would need something to watch. And what do you know? We have lots of Veggietales DVDs sitting around our house. And those have been a staple of our family the last couple years.
I found Veggietales a lot later than some of the other kids. I remember reading about it somewhere and then suddenly saw the videos playing. I think we were on vacation at Focus on the Family or something. Veggietales did not come from Focus on the Family, but Focus on the Family was promoting one of those videos. And I think it was Dave and the Giant Pickle. And that looked so strange to me, but it was obviously noteworthy. And then, as we talk about later with Mike, suddenly Veggietales was just everywhere. It was haunting the youth groups. It was taking over the kids' birthday parties, and with good reason. Even those who are not Christians now, who deconstruct and leave evangelicalism and all that, they cannot quit Veggietales. That's a high point of their existence, even when they were among evangelical culture. Well, Veggietales is still around, and so is Mike Nawrocki. As I mentioned earlier, he's going to be at the Fpea conference May 26th through 28th. That's in 2022. If you're listening to this podcast on release day, it'll be this upcoming weekend. I'll be there as well. I'll get to meet Mike and spend time with several other Christian authors of fantastical stories. Tim Shoemaker will be there. James R. Hannibal will be there again, along with Rebecca P. Minor. Catherine Jones Payne will be there, Emily H. Jeffries, Kristen Stifel, and as I mentioned, yours truly. That's the Florida Parent Educators Association Conference in Orlando. They actually get a keynote address from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, so I'm hoping to leave the booth for just a few minutes and skip over there and see what he has to say. Whatever you may think of this particular political leader who might be running for president and everything, he's a big homeschool family supporter, so that's why they have him there again. I'm looking forward to seeing that. And maybe, gentle listener, if you happen to be in the Orlando area and you get bored with Disney World or the Harry Potter land or any of that, come on over to the convention center. We will include all the links in the show notes about the event.
Veggietales is one of those interesting things, Stephen, where you can't really see what spawned it. Like it isn't just like a direct copy of something in secular culture and then was slapped with the Christian label. Like, it's so unique, it's so original. But I've also seen how it has influenced other things. I can't prove this at all, but I totally see some inspiration being drawn from Veggietales for one of my favorite cartoons, which is Homestar Runner and Strong Bad. Homestar Runner has no arms, and yet he's able to hold things. And there's just a very just silly, wacky style to it, a lot of silly songs. And I think it's really has inspired. I think Veggietales really has inspired a lot of other cool things in culture.
Almost certainly has. There's been an influence of Veggietales outside of the evangelical subculture from which it arose. People will talk about it, they'll comment about it, usually positive from what I've seen. Like I said, even those who seem to despise Christianity now have fond memories for Veggietales. So maybe remember then that Jesus Christ is the one who gave those guys the talents that they have, and then find your way back to him. If you liked Veggietales, whatever you liked about it, is probably something that you would like about Jesus. And as Mike says, though, there was never a veggie Jesus, for which I'm very grateful, which led to the creation of the Dead Sea Squirrel series, which explores more about the life of Christ. I mentioned that Realmakers Bookstore is the host for those book signings, those authors coming up here in Florida. That leads to our first sponsor for this episode. Once again, the Realm Makers 2022 conference. This is coming up fast, coming up in July of this year, July 2022. Here's more information about that conference. It's Atlantic City, July 21st through 23rd of 2022. Here's how they pitch it. Are you excited to take the next step in your speculative fiction journey? Then you don't need to take a trip to space or time travel or forge your own sword. Instead, just join us for Realm Makers 2022. It's an annual writers conference, and it's in person in Atlantic City. But if you can't get there, it's also live online. You can watch the classes live streaming in real time, even if you can't travel physically to Atlantic City. Whether you're attending real or online, you can connect on the Realm Sphere, a dedicated conference space and online community. This will be an amazing value too, because this year, every conference attendee gets access to replays of every class available through the Realm Sphere. Whether you're attending in real life or virtually, if you have, say, a story you've made, if you yourself count as a Christian creator of fantastical fiction, and you think an agent or a publisher or an editor may want to have a look at this story, pitch it at Realm Makers. You can see more information in our show notes for this episode 113, or just go to lorehaven.com/podcast sponsors. Zach, I hear a strange sound outside, almost like a flying creature you don't ordinarily expect to fly. So I wonder what fantastical transport means Mike Nawrocki has taken to arrive in the studio. Let's go and see. Mike Nawrocki has just arrived in the Lorehaven studios aboard the back of a flying squirrel. He is the co-creator of Veggietales and the voice of the beloved Larry the Cucumber. He has been making entertaining and wholesome content for kids since 1993. He created, wrote, and directed most of the extremely popular Silly Songs with Larry segments and lent his screenwriting and directing talents to Veggietales episodes, as well as their movies Jonah and the Pirates Who Don't Do Anything. Mike also developed and wrote for 3-2-1 Penguins and authored a number of Veggietales books and CD projects. Of course, his latest series is the very popular Dead Sea Squirrels series. We'll talk about that later in this interview. Mike also serves as assistant professor of film and animation at Lipscomb University and co-hosts the weekly podcast, The Bible for Kids, now on loan at the Fantastical Truth podcast. So, Mike, very glad you're here.
Stephen, thank you so much for having me. Great to meet you both, and Zach as well.
Great to see you, Mike. Well, I remember I guess it was 93, 94 when Where Is My Hairbrush came out. So the church I was going to at the time got a big screen and rented like a space at a park or something and showed that. And it was like, what is this? This is crazy. Like, how fun. So it's really, really cool to meet you after 30 years or so that came out.
Wow. So you go way back then. That's a old school veggie. Yeah. So I remember, I think that was our third episode was so I think 94 maybe would have been it, or early 95. So yeah, that's going way back. So
yeah. So how did you first get into creative stories? How did you first discover Christian fantasy, Christian fiction, and just biblical truth in general?
Wow. Well, I grew up a huge fan of fantasy literature. And I think probably my first fantasy book was Terry Brooks. And the sort of
yes,
I've said Shannara, but people have corrected me that it's Shannara, I guess.
Yeah. I always said it wrong too.
Yeah.
He was at Realm Makers as a guest of honor a few years ago, and he gave the correct pronunciation, which I've already forgotten.
Yeah. So, but I love that book. Of course, I loved Narnia. I loved Lord of the Rings growing up. The Dune books, I remember reading those. But I also, I grew up in the church. Grew up Catholic initially, and then right when I was around 13 years old, my dad came to know the Lord, and he was transferred over to Washington D.C. He was a military guy, and we were living in Colorado, and we couldn't sell our house initially, so he moved out into was living with his commanding officer for a while. Came to know the Lord. When we were eventually reunited as a family, we had a brand new dad, and we were all really like, amazed at this new creature that we had discovered. And so, it made the rest of the family really interested in diving deeper into our faith, and became involved in a Christian and Missionary Alliance church in the Washington, D.C. area. And I, just started really getting involved in the youth group, and that church and another church went to very dynamic youth group, very arts ministry. So I started, singing and acting and becoming involved that way in church. And I just loved making people laugh. I found that that's what was really, drove me. And I was a huge fan of the Dr. Demento radio show, which played every Sunday night. And I think they're making a doc or a movie now about Al Yankovic, so that'll probably come up in Al Yankovic's movie. But I'm a big Al Yankovic fan. I love parody music probably more than other music, and so I just had this love of story, this love of music, this love of performing. I had no idea that could actually be a career, much less a ministry. I walked forward at a youth conference when I was a junior in high school and dedicated my vocation to ministry. And the best I could figure out in my 17-year-old brain at that time was that I was going to be a missionary doctor. Our Christian and Missionary Alliance are very missions minded. I thought my mom was a nurse, my dad was an engineer, my older brother was a chemistry major in college at the time. So that's kind of where I saw myself. And, I went away to college having done all these creative things, this writing and, performing and everything, and even puppetry, and, ended up meeting Phil Vischer on the puppet team at St. Paul Bible College, on St. Paul Bible College campus. And we just started writing and performing and just having a great time together. And that obviously, eventually led to Veggietales years down the road. But the long-winded answer to my question or your question was that, yeah, these things were always, I felt so much of a charge, just in energy and just in passion about telling stories, about connecting with people, about making people laugh. And it's just been amazing to be able to integrate that with my faith and, do that for now so many years.
Yeah, it sounds like you were at a church that really nurtured your love of fantasy, your love of stories. When you started talking about Dune and the Shannara series, I was listening for something specific. I was listening to see if you would say, "Oh, but I didn't know anyone else who liked these books," or "I was kind of a weirdo," or people try to discourage me. But it sounds like I could be wrong, but my assumption here is that those were not discouraged and maybe even encouraged because you had, like you said, that arts program or ministry at your church. So did I?
Yeah,
guess that
yeah,
right?
I think that's fair to say. None of that was discouraged. Even because I remember there was sort of the rumbling of, rock music is not, it's bad to listen to, and we really didn't get any of that at our church either. So that wasn't a discouragement. And I think more than that, my older brother, Bob, he is 6 or 7 years older than me. And he was really
older
into all
brother
those
named
things.
Bob. Wait a second.
I do.
Is this a glitch in the Matrix?
On in the past. That's funny.
Yeah, we need to pump the brakes here. Yeah, no. So he was really. So he kind of made me aware initially of these books, and so I kind of came to them after him. So I he encouraged me into this literature, and so yeah, it was very. I found nothing to push back on me to say, oh no, don't listen to this or don't read this. For me, it was just, a great exploration and had a great time diving into all this stuff. And, and particularly with C.S. Lewis, with Narnia and, other fiction, Great Divorce, other Screw Tape Letters. I just ate that stuff up. I absolutely loved it.
I was raised similarly, Mike, and then for a time, I had a puppet stage in the basement. That was actually right around the time Veggietales was taking off. So you all had obviously gotten to the puppetry earlier, and then reading Phil Vischer's book, Me, Myself, and Bob, from his vantage, he comments a lot on like how the puppet ministry led to, the opportunity to get his computer animation rig and, try animating a candy bar. And not to step on your story here, but that's some of the origins of Veggietales there that he's described. But I'm curious then from your vantage, what led you to help create the hit Veggietales, basically a blockbuster franchise in which you ended up then effectively being the youth group for a lot of kids in evangelical cultures. And to this day, many people, like even there's a couple of teenagers I was talking to I said, "Hey, we're going to Mike Nawrocki and Fantastical Truth. He helped co-create Veggietales, and that is the first guest I think we've had on this podcast whose product they knew and had some very fond memories about with the silly songs and everything."
So I mentioned, meeting Phil at school, and he and I would write and perform these puppet shows together, and we like to say that we perform them at different churches around the college. This was in near the Minneapolis St. Paul area. St. Paul Bible College is what the college was called. It's now called Crown College. It's in the kind of the western suburbs of Minneapolis. And so we like to say we would roam the Minnesota countryside, scaring the Baptists with our puppets. And so we just had this really crazy. We both grew up huge Jim Henson fans, obviously Monty Python fans, Mel Brooks, Dr. Demento, Weird Al Yankovic. We had all those things and interjected into that, into our thing. But then also, a deep faith, and wanted to integrate stories of the faith into these real, stories that would, be humorous and engaging for kids. So we love doing that, and again, for me, this was just, I was just passing through this school. I was only going to go there for a year or two. It was the denominational college. It didn't have a pre-med program. And so I had planned on moving on after a year or two, and came to find that Phil also had a similar plan, because he wanted to go to film school and they didn't have film school. And so we made this great plan. Okay, we're gonna we'll both go here for a year and a half. We'll go back home for a semester. He lived in Chicago. I lived in Denver, and then we'll move out to Los Angeles. We'll be roommates, and you go to film school. I'll go to pre-med. It'll be great because we were such good friends. And so we made those plans. I went back to Denver. He went back to Chicago at the end of the year and a half at St. Paul, and he landed a job. He landed an internship at a video post-production company, and then they offered him a job in doing kind of what he wanted to do. And so he was like, well, I don't think I'm going to do school. And so I'm roommateless all of a sudden. And my parents at the time were actually going through a divorce. And my home life was really rough. And so I just needed to get out of there. And so I just decided, well, there's just as many places in Chicago to do pre-med as there are in Southern California. So I packed up everything that I owned in my 1980 red Ford Fiesta, which is the same car in the Cheeseburger song, by the way, for those of you who can remember.
Yes, it
the little
is.
car that
That's
pulled
correct.
up to that was my,
stayed at the drive-thru till sunrise.
That's right. And so moved up to Chicago, started working to get residency in Illinois, enrolled at the University of Illinois, Chicago, to do pre-med. In fact, and then I got a job at Renaissance Video, which is where Phil was working. I got a job as the graveyard VHS duplicator, and so I would graveyard shift. So from like 10, I don't know what it was, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I would duplicate videotapes. But I started to get to know the equipment. I had run sound for my brother's band in high school, so I kind of had some technical ability. But just getting to know the equipment more. Phil was working there, and we just we had this opportunity and this availability of equipment. Now that is so common. I mean, you can take your iPhone out and shoot a pretty decent movie. But back then it was, you just couldn't do that. And so, but we were at this video post house where we had these cameras and this editing equipment. And so we started to take advantage of that and just do these little projects and just had a lot of fun. Phil was very still, driven on, okay, filmmaking and all that. I'm like, oh, and I'm like, well, I'm going to be a doctor, but this is fun. I'll kind of do this until, I need to go away. And so, but we just kept working on these projects, and then along comes computer animation. And it's like, wait a minute, we could kind of do what we did with puppets with this new technology. We would just need really simple characters with no hair and no clothes and, no appendages. And and you mentioned candy bars. Phil actually modeled a candy bar initially. And then his wife, Lisa, who later turned into the voice of Junior Asparagus, kind of walked by and she said, Phil, I don't think moms are going to appreciate kids learning, biblical values from candy bars. It just doesn't seem healthy. And so, so the next thing that popped into Phil's mind was, well, vegetables are healthy and they're limbless, so let's try that. And so then, the cucumber with eyes was born, who later became Larry, obviously, and then Bob. So, but so playing around with all of this, and we actually put together a little 5-minute demo to try to sell the show. Phil went out to raise money to do that. We're working at the same company at this time, still in video post as our day jobs, kind of doing this at night. And, meanwhile, I, got done with my pre-med. I was a biology and history major, and I applied with the Peace Corps. And my plan was then to go over teach biology in Africa for 2 years and then come back and go to medical school. Well, the very same month that I got my acceptance letter from Peace Corps, we found out that we got funding for Veggietales to make
Oh,
our
wow.
first episode. So, so that was a really pivotal moment in my life.
Here's the moment.
Yeah, here it is, the moment of choice
in the road.
Yeah,
Split
it totally
the timelines.
was. Yeah, I just see that. I even when I say that, I picture the scarecrow with his arms crossed, going this way or that way, in the Wizard of Oz. And so prayed about it and asked people in my life who knew me well, what should I do? And I really, what it came down to is I really felt like God had gifted me in a way that He wanted to use me, and so I, turned down the Peace Corps offer, and we got to work on Where's God When I'm Scared. And it was, we took out ads in Christian parenting magazines to sell the first episode. We didn't have a distribution deal. We got about 500 orders for the very first VHS. I think we spent about $60,000, in production to make the first one. And
we should probably define what a VHS is for our younger listeners.
I know, right? For all the kids out there,
before streaming video, before DVDs, before anything.
DVD. I know,
and to do it.
And in fact, that was, one of the reasons that we were able to do that, because it was a point in history where, before that, any content creator needed to rely on either being in a film, having a film release, in a film theater, or being on television. Those are the gatekeepers. And along comes this technology to say, wait a minute, you can create something and people can watch it in their houses, and that had never happened before. And so this convergence of, computer animation, which made animating a half-hour video possible for a handful of people, and this, delivery technique of a VHS, it's like, okay, this is something that you can do now, that you couldn't do before. And so, but anyways, the, $15 a pop at, 500 orders, the math doesn't come out to 60,000. So if you do that, a little bit less than that, quite a bit less than that. But one of the orders came from, this was all up in Chicago. One of the orders came from a record label in Nashville who was starting a kids video label. And they saw our ad and were intrigued and ordered a copy and loved it. And then signed us up for a distribution deal. So then we would, from show 2 on, we would get advances on production, and allowing us to produce the show and then put it out. But we were still squeaking by, because the advances weren't very much. And, so we still had to, supplement our income and do all of that for a number of years until the show really started. So this was 93, 94. The show really started to take off around 98, 97, 98. And things went kind of bonkers after that. So,
yeah, I was on the receiving end of that. I may have seen, probably not one of the ads in the parenting magazines you mentioned, but I do remember seeing an ad, I think in a kids magazine. Maybe it was the Focus on the Family Clubhouse magazine, to which I was subscribed back then. And I remember seeing, the VHS tape. I was into the Adventures in Odyssey VHSs there at the time.
Yeah.
And I see VeggieTales, and I go like, well, what is this? Where is God when I'm so scared? What is going on? And I remember it being very unique. And then I kind of I probably wasn't in the main age demographic at the time, or so I thought. So I just kind of forgot about it. And then suddenly Veggietales is everywhere a few years later. And not just little kids, but big kids and teenagers and their parents. Like, you all made a show that appealed not just to kids, but to viewers of all ages. The blend of humor, the novelty of the medium, and the wholesome lessons, but also a little bit of snark y'all put in there. It just really was a great combination.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and it was surprising to us, because obviously we were gearing shows with lessons, aimed at 4 or 5 year olds, just in terms of the lesson language. But we just loved. I mean, we loved making ourselves laugh, making the shows, and so we'd put in jokes that, okay, a 4-year-old is never going to get this, but mom will get it, or dad will get it, or their older sibling will. And so, and I look back to Bugs Bunny, watching Bugs Bunny as a kid, and then again as an adult, and there's a whole, it's a whole onion, whole layered onion of humor and meaning in there. And so, we love that. But I do remember hearing back those first reports that, high school youth groups and college dorms are having, Veggietales watching parties. And I'm like, really? That's kind of wild. But then realizing, well, hey, we're not much older than that ourselves back then. And, we enjoy these. So why not? So, but yeah, it was really cool to see all that happening.
Yeah. So speaking of origin stories, I've kind of polled my family and asked them, what was kind of your first memory of all this? And my wife discovered it in college. You mentioned that, and she loved the "I Love My Lips" song, and she just laughs. She still laughs about that song over and over. My oldest daughter loves the dancing cucumber and especially the no. How does the no comprendo part go?
No comprendo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pepino ballerina. In fact,
I'll show you no comprendo.
I'll show you. See my poster in the back of me there. Yeah.
There it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. Watch the cucumber. See how he moves. Yeah.
But then for my second oldest daughter, kind of a funnier origin story for her. She was about 3 or 4. So in that target range you mentioned, when we first introduced Veggietales to her, and it was through this little a Christmas gift we gave her at the time, and it was and so she was opening all her gifts on Christmas, and each one that she'd open, she'd announce it. She's like, "Oh, I got a teddy bear," or "I got a hair bow," or "I got a book." And then she opened Bob the Tomato and Larry Cucumber, and she said, "I got this."
She did not know.
We're like, "Oh, then it hit us. We're like,
what is it?
We haven't watched that with you. That's why you don't know what this is." But
that
it was
is so funny.
Like, we quoted that for years. Like, "I got this."
Wow. Well, speaking of Christmas, I still remember, because I was mentioning earlier the appeal to many different ages. I remember, I think we must have gotten the VHS tape of The Toy That Saved Christmas. Yeah. Which I remember at the time being very impressed by, because the toy actually had animated limbs.
Yeah, I think that may have been, I think that was a first. That was maybe a little bit before we did Fib from Outer Space, and Fib also had,
Yes, he did.
limbs.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the giant
technology
pickle
was advancing.
The giant pickle needed to do some boxing moves, and the gloves just floated in the air. And
right, exactly. Yeah, Goliath. the Goliath. Yeah, zucchini.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the Toy That Saved Christmas, I remember there's this big sled chase scene at the end. And by the way, there's another notable joke about the Veggies' lack of limbs. And then at the end, everybody's hanging on to each other. And then I think Mr. Nezer gives the punchline there. And I know you're not supposed to sing the bunny song, and you're not supposed to do the Mr. Nezer voice, but he just says into the echoing void, "A little help." And I remember my dad just watching that chase scene, and my dad just cracked up. I don't know. It just worked on him, and it worked on a lot of us there. Not just the silly songs, but the stories themselves. But of course, the silly songs just went absolutely nuts. And I understand you had a hand in many, if not most, of those silly songs.
Yeah. Again, I was a big fan of parody music, and Phil wrote the very first silly song, which is "Everybody's Got a Water Buffalo," so he wrote that one, and obviously I sang it as Larry. And then on our second episode, and that section was just where the silly song was just meant to be a break between the two songs, and our reference for that was Monty Python's "And Now for Something Completely Different." Of course, so we'd have our a thematic story, and then break for something completely different, and then back to another thematic story. And so did that for episode 1. Episode 2 did this kind of SNL type skit, the Forgive-O-Matic, and it was probably just loosely based off of the Bassomatic, one of the early SNL John Belushi skits. And it was okay, but it just it wasn't the same. It wasn't music. You couldn't sing it. And so we got letters, after that. It's like, what happened to the silly songs? I was looking forward to another silly song. And so I remember Phil saying, "Hey, Mike, we need another silly song." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm on it." And so I just remember, just what am I going to do? And I was in the shower one day, and I couldn't find my razor. And I started singing, "Where is my razor? Where is my?" And so in the bathroom, I kind of came up with this little operetta about looking for my razor, and I was like, "Oh, that's a great silly song." So I went to work, and I said, "Hey, Phil, I got this." And so I started singing, and he just looked at me stone faced, and he said, "You can't sing songs about razors for kids. Are you crazy?" And so
you can't. We're not supposed to sing the razor song.
You're right. No razors. And so I came up with hairbrush, which was an equal amount of syllables, and then off it went. So hairbrush was my first, and then I think Dance of the I Love My Lips maybe was second. And that one I wrote.
And that was in the Dave and the Giant Pickle I think. Yes, it was. Yeah.
Or maybe it was
Dance of the Cucumber was in number 4. Wasn't number 4 Rack Shack and Benny?
Yeah. Okay. So Dance of the Cucumber was next.
Back.
Yeah. It's also So 3 was Hairbrush, and then Dance of the Cucumber. And my wife is native Spanish speaking. She's from Colombia, and she was. We were dating at the time, and we were sitting in her car, and she was listening to this song called Los Americanos, which was. It was sort of kind of maybe a Spanish parody song, but in Spanish the guy was singing about Americans, and in doing so, he was kind of making fun of, Americans.
Gringos,
yeah.
That's great.
And so I just love, so I'm saying, what's he saying? And Lisa was translating it to me, an American sitting there. And I just love that dynamic of being insulted, by a translation, so I'm like, okay, that'll work really great. And so, that's sort of the origin of Dance of the Cucumber. So it was fun over all those years just to kind of, combine these things in real life in a way that I thought was kind of odd and funny, and, come up with the song, from it.
Well, which one would you say is your favorite one that you worked on?
Oh man, that's really hard because the Hairbrush was the first one, so that's got a special place. I liked all of the Boys in the Sink stuff.
That's actually my favorite.
Belly Button. Yeah. Belly Button did another one called Bubble Wrap. I do like the Cheeseburger song, even though Larry doesn't sing it. The Mr. Lunt, Larry initially was going to sing the song, and that one was called Drive-Thru Girl initially. And instead of, so it was Larry falling in love with the drive-thru girl, which was weird. And so then I just cast it as Mr. Lunt, and that was even weirder. And so then it's like, no, it can't be a person. Mustache, yeah. I guess it was just creepy. And so then it was like, oh wait, what if he's in love with a food item? That'd be funnier. So, so that was that one. But that was, I think the Pirates, Barbara Manatee. I've got a solid oak Barbara Manatee right behind me. It's one of my prized possessions.
Oh, wow. So it's not the stuffed object. It's an actual solid. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. One of our animators, his dad was a chainsaw sculptor, and he carved that from a chainsaw out of a solid block of oak, and it weighs like 40 pounds. It's super.
So you're not going to be able to bring that to the Orlando conference for Rumble.
No, I won't. I won't be able to do that.
We'll just have to talk about it. Maybe bring a picture or something.
Yeah.
So we can't make any promises regarding Barbara Okati. We call her there.
Yeah. Okati. I like that.
Well, something I saw that was really funny lately is how these old songs are kind of finding new life through, internet memes. And one of them was the water buffalo. Like, everyone has a water buffalo. And then underneath it says fact check. Not everyone has it. It's like the social media, fact check.
Right.
Learn more about water buffaloes and who actually owns them. And I was like, I love it. Right. That's great.
Going down the meme line, one of my students pointed out to me, hey, Professor Nawrocki, have you seen the weed eater meme? I'm like, what is the weed eater meme? And it was like,
oh no,
we did from, so
it's
it was
real.
the wonderful world of autotainment. These two robots were telling jokes, and the punchline was weed eater, so it was like this non sequitur kind of randomly generated joke, and it turned into this whole meme thing. And I, sure enough, I went in and, researched it, and it was this whole thing. So it was so cool to see stuff like that.
You all actually did predict meme culture with those skits. It was such a random, like, in the future, all entertainment will be automated. It'll be, and that is basically, you were predicting this kind of random, Gen Z meme culture. In fact, the only thing y'all didn't predict was the amount of dark humor that spreads amongst younger audiences, particularly on the internet. Y'all always had a lot of restraint when it came to those things, which I always appreciated. Even when Mr. Lunt is in a Shakespeare skit and he dresses up as Ophelia, and they push him on a stage and he says, "Oh, I think we're going to get letters about this." Meta moment like that, especially kind of guessing what happened with that whole Bunny song debacle. I always appreciated, like, y'all were in on the joke. You were just, it wasn't roasting the audience. You're still respecting the audience. But you're also kind of acknowledging, like, you probably did get some letters about the Bunny song, because I could just imagine the kids running around saying, "I don't love my mom or my dad, just the bunny."
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I think I think it was what, you obviously growing up in the culture of the church, you kind of know where the line is, and so you kind of want to tiptoe up to it, in a humorous way, and maybe dip your toes over it, and kind of come back, but you know where that is, and how to be how to be irreverent enough, to
Yes.
but without being insulting, so we love to do that. And I think the bunny song was one of those, and just being self-referential to where, knowing where the line was, and sort of apologizing for it on screen at times.
I just going back to something you said earlier about you really found this calling with humor. I would love to just hear why, what you've seen God use that for, or how you've seen God work through humor. Because
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of everything you mentioned. Weird Al Yankovic. I grew up with both the tape for Michael Jackson Bad and the
Oh yeah.
Weird Al take for Fat.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
And pretty much every time he
Got
came
my
out
own
with
zip
one, I'd get
code.
that and I'd
Oh,
listen to
yeah.
it the other one.
Oh man, another
Yeah.
one rides the bus.
See, there you go.
Yeah. I just think it's eh, I think filmmaking, visual storytelling, or even books, just tie into emotion, and we learn through emotion. Through when we're making a dramatic argument, I think it needs to be proven out by a sense that this is emotionally true. It's like you're avoiding the eye roll with any lesson if you feel that it's true. If you've done your job as a writer to lead your character, through that change in a way that when that lesson emerges, it's true to the character, it's true to the story, and sometimes that can be it can be a profound sort of awe, sense of awe. But I've found that in kind of my voice, a lot of that just comes through humor, and I think humor is a great way to kind of point to truth as well. But just it's an emotion that you can use really well, I think, in storytelling to engage an audience, and sometimes kind of lower those defenses a little bit, to a message coming through that's going to make it more acceptable.
And for those blessed individuals going to the Fpea conference in Orlando, one of Mike's workshops is actually called A Spoonful of Sugar, Incorporating Lesson into Story. Sounds like we just got a little sneak preview of that lesson there, Mike.
Yeah, exactly.
Along with
Exactly.
how I ended up at an animated cucumber, which is a workshop you have on Friday. And we'll have the link in the show notes to the news post that includes all that information for those who want to go to that event.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I've used a couple of thoughts from that spot, or from that talk. So absolutely.
So a couple of years back, there was a movie called Elf with Will Ferrell,
Oh
and he's
yeah.
meeting with the famous children's author, and they're trying to come up, or I should say, his dad is meeting with this famous author, and they're trying to come up with a new children's story. And at
Yep.
one point, there's this line in the movie, you probably know what it is, where he says,
Yeah.
"How about we try farm vegetables? Those are really hot right now." And I've always wondered,
Yep.
was that a pointer to you guys? And did you take that as like, hey, we made it. We got mentioned in a big,
Oh
Hollywood
yeah.
movie now.
Oh my goodness. Well, there's so much more to that story that is so fascinating. So, all right. So we were acquired when we went through our bankruptcy in 2003. Big idea. We were acquired by a company out of New York called Classic Media, and they owned a lot of classic, cartoons like Rudolph and Frosty and Lone Ranger, and you name it. They just had acquired all that IP. So we were a subsidiary of them. We moved from Chicago down to Nashville and started making more shows. And we Phil wrote and I directed Lord of the Beans. And so we started
Oh yeah, that was
this
right around the time the
show.
movies came out. Yeah.
Yeah. And for us, we were operating under the assumption of parody law, which, we had, done in the past. And so we're like, okay, we're just making fun of this. So we're standing on firm legal ground here. And but we had started to advertise, that we're doing Lord of the Beans. And so we get a letter from a cease and desist order from Saul Zaentz,
Saul Zaentz sent you?
yeah,
Oh, wow. I somehow missed that. Wow.
yeah. So we got a cease and desist that this is not parody. This you are unlawfully using this without permission. And we were like, really, and so from a legal standpoint, it was determined that we don't, we could try to fight it, but we didn't want to fight that battle. But we were already months into production. We had a lot invested in the show, and we were even starting to do some merchandising and all that kind of stuff. And so, however, the Lord in His providence, because Classic Media was one of our, was our owner. Right around that time, the movie Elf was being made, and the Saul's Ants was also involved in that movie, and they came knocking on Classic's door saying, "Hey, this IP that you own." This old Rankin Bass stuff,
yes.
and the Norwal, and all of that. Yeah, we'd love permission for that. And they said, "Well, tell you what, if you let us go ahead with Lord of the Beans, we'll give you permission to we'll do a trade." And so they agreed. We had to actually get rid of all the merchandise. We couldn't do any merchandising, so that's why you never saw any Veggietales Lord of the Beans. We actually had to destroy boxes of Iricorns, so which was kind of sad. We never got any bootleg ones, so they all just never left the factory. They just went right from the factory to the furnace.
So don't go landfill diving looking for those alongside the Atari games of the ET or any of that.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. So there was that connection between Veggietales and Elf in that way. So I got to think that was kind of in there in the script. So it was
wow,
pretty
what
crazy.
A fascinating story.
I didn't even know we'd be going there. I thought it would have been that somebody who wrote Elf was a big Veggietales fan. This was a lot more intricate than I had expected.
Yeah. And it could have been, it could have been both, but I know we were definitely tied together in that way. So
that must have been the olive branch that they kind of extended after all that went out.
Yeah. And the funny thing was, I remember just going to see Elf in the theaters and immediately recognizing, okay, this is going to always be my favorite Christmas movie. I just loved it so much. It was
of course, it's directed by Jon Favreau, who later on kickstarted the MCU and helped save Star Wars, at least my opinion, with The Mandalorian. So that guy just seems he's just on a complete winning streak. That's incredible.
Oh man, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, y'all are on a winning streak as well. And Veggietales, it's still around. I mean, still making new shows. People fondly remember the silly songs, not just from the past, but also right up to the present, present company included.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike, I presume you're still voicing characters then, like Larry the Cucumber and others for Veggietales. So that's still very much a part of your reality. Am I right?
Yeah. So, right now on Yippee, which is a streaming service, Phil and I were part of 26 new episodes, and I believe they're still releasing those because they were doing like a one a month release, for a couple years, and so those are still in release. So those are all recorded and done with, but probably ended for me about a year ago. But we were involved in the writing and voicing of those things, and so obviously though it's no longer a day-to-day thing for me, the brand and the character it just has a special place for me, and I'm always willing and able to answer the call, answer the call of Larry.
Well, would that be a Larry Boy? It'd have to be that the plunger head signal in the sky there for Larry Boy.
That's right. Yeah, just Larry a little gruffer, a little more gruff in the voice.
Well, my kids were wondering if you get recognized as Larry, like at airports or bookstores or just whenever you're out and about.
Well, he's a little less green than you would expect.
I know, right? Well, I tell people it's a great way to be famous because, it's like, when people find out who you are, it's like, oh, there's all this love and, stuff that goes along with that, which is awesome. But, nobody really knows who I am unless, somebody can recognize me from a DVD special or whatever, or it comes up in the context of a conversation. So you can kind of have a normal life, and not be recognized, when you're going out to dinner or at an airport or something like that. So it's great, but I love it. And people ask me, do you ever get tired of doing that voice? And I'm like, that voice fed my children. So I never get tired. I never get tired of doing that voice.
I must admit I had that question in the back of my mind, because you don't want to, you don't want to have somebody, if you're good at, as the Joker said, if you're good at something, never do it for free. So it just depends on one's take on that. And I'm sure there's some musicians who are rather sick and tired of songs that they've gotten very popular for doing. But that's really cool that you're still able to enjoy that legacy, even though you've also, we'll get to this in a moment, you've also moved into your own solo creation here, the Dead Sea Squirrels. I guess we'll move that question there. That's the topic of the next question. That's the series that has been selling like gangbusters at the Realmmakers bookstore. It's for middle grade kids, lavishly comically illustrated. The Dead Sea Squirrels, 10 books into it now. And of course, we'll be selling those at the FPEA booth for role makers this coming weekend. But why do kids love this series so much? And I guess actually stepping back is what led to this idea, and what have you enjoyed about branching off into this new fantastic universe?
Oh man, it's been so much fun. So, I mentioned before just how irreverent we were with Veggietales, but one of the very strict lines that we adhered to back in the early days was to never, and continuing forward, is to never depict Jesus as a vegetable.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's just okay. We knew where the line was, and we weren't going to cross it. And so which limited the amount of New Testament stories, obviously, that we could tell with Veggietales. And so that was always very much on my mind. And, a number of years ago, this idea popped in my head as an animated series. Well, what if characters from the first century could come forward in time, rather than going back in time, kind of like Encino Man, and so this concept of Encino Man meets Indiana Jones, meets a bad pun of Dead Sea Squirrels came into my mind, and it just kind of hung there because I was always very, very busy just making Veggietales. And so when I left Big Idea full time in 2016, I wanted to get it going as an animated series, and I was talking to a friend whom I known for years and worked on some projects with, and he was actually his background was in the book world, and he said, "Mike, have you ever thought about this as an early reader series?" And it hadn't occurred to me. It wasn't my world. But I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I'd love to explore that because, I'm a writer, and what a great way to develop the characters and the world and do it in book form. So I went away for a couple months and just did some research on, that genre, and, drafted some ideas, and he actually set up a lunch for me with Tyndale Publishing. He has his friend Tyndale Publishers, Linda Howard, and I thought it was just going to be a nice meet and greet. So I'm out to lunch, and he said, "Hey, Mike, it turned out to be an ambush pitch." He said, "Hey, Mike, okay. Yeah, pitch your Squirrels idea to Linda," and I felt really ill prepared, but I sort of got that out, and she loved the idea. And so then did a 6-book deal, and so I kind of structured the story, and it's all kind of a, it's unlike Veggietales, which every story is sort of self-enclosed. My idea for Squirrels has always been to have this bigger narrative that plays out, and with a theme that actually resolves in each book, but then a bigger narrative that continues. Kind of what we're seeing on streaming in general nowadays, and so I kind of drew up the arc of season 1 and kind of left that not knowing exactly where it was going to go after that, and then which was 1 through 6. And then those started doing well, and Tyndale came back and said, "Hey, we'd love to do 6 more books." So we extended that to a 12-book deal. And so then I sort of, did that arc and was writing through it. And I just really enjoyed the writing process, after having just been a screenwriter for so many years, the ability to do internal dialogue and narrative commentary was so much fun. It's like, wow, I can, kind of make a little comment here, about things. And, with screenwriting, it's like, okay, no, you have to, you have to write what you're going to see, nothing that's not going to be seen. Yeah. You got to show everything, and so, none of those little narrative things or, internal dialogue ever come through, so it's just a different discipline. So, but I just had so much fun doing it. And, so it was just really fun to be able to do that. Obviously it tracks, and the other thing that I loved about it too, is I based it off of, my own son, Michael. The 2 main characters, besides Merle and Pearl Squirrel, are Michael and Justin. And my real life son, Michael, his best buddy's name was Justin growing up. And so, kind of playing off their relational dynamic and, integrating that into the show. And then, many things about my own family are sort of reflected in that show as well. And so I just had fun kind of tapping into all of that and creating this world, in this, kind of this lore of, these 2 squirrels who, Merle, has always wanted to visit the Dead Sea because you can't sink, so, the first century, he builds a little raft and takes his bride, down to the Dead Sea, but he hasn't thought that far ahead, and they can't get back, and they end up, getting, going into a cave to get some shade and get out of the heat and become, trapped there and encased in salt for a millennium. And so they're found by this little boy, Michael, who is his dad's an archaeologist. He's there on a summer dig. Michael he's brought Justin along with him, finds these squirrels and he stashes them in his backpack, sneaks them back home with him to Tennessee, sets them up on his dresser with the window open at night, and they get rained on and come back to life. And now they have all this knowledge from growing up around the Sea of Galilee when Jesus had his ministry there to the modern day. So they're able to share stories of first century with Michael and his friends in the modern day. And so that's kind of the setup of the show. And so it was just really fun. And, obviously you mentioned, 10 books are out now. I just turned in the final manuscript for book 11. And then book 12 will be my summer project this year. And then we're also, we can probably get into more discussion about this too, animating the shows as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So
yeah. Because you've said a few times, I mean, it starts off as these books for early readers, but then also you've mentioned that it's going to be a show. So do we want to talk about how it's gone from this original show idea then to this book series and then now back to being an actual animated series coming up?
Yeah. And it's such it's so surprising because I would have had no idea how to, that it would have traced this path. I just have seen God's hand at work throughout this whole thing. But so I mentioned, I left Big Idea in 2016 with this idea, and then started developing into books. And the other thing that I did was I met with a friend of mine who I'd worked with on several projects before with Veggietales, Steve Taylor, who's a Christian songwriter and a filmmaker. And Steve had helped start a film school at Lipscomb University in Nashville. And you remember I Want to Be a Clone?
I was wondering, is it that Steve Taylor?
It's that Steve Taylor.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah. And so I met with Steve and just to see what was going on in his life, and he talked about the school, and I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And he asked me if I had ever thought about teaching, and I thought, I think that would be awesome. I would love to do that, but I would have no idea how to teach in the arts because my underground background was in biology. And so I came on to Lipscomb as an artist in residence, and then went through their MFA in film program, so Masters of Fine Arts in Film. And as I was going through that as a student, I was using that as an opportunity to now do adaptations of the books into screenplays and turn them in as assignments. And so, I would, kind of doing double duty as a student and getting credit for that. And then, turning those in. And then, for a producing class, I actually, did the pitch Bible for the Squirrel series and kind of teeing it all up and getting this ready to go as a show. So by the time I graduated, I had something to pitch and actually got an offer, as a licensing offer. And I took it to Steve and he said, well, we could actually probably just figure out a way to do this yourself. I mean, you've done Veggietales for 25 years. Why wouldn't we be able to do this? And so we actually, found some money for a pilot, did that. And then did a Kickstarter. And through the Kickstarter, we identified a couple other folks who, we didn't raise it through the Kickstarter. We ended up shutting that down, but a couple of other folks reached out to us that were interested in funding it. And, so now we're in full production of 13 episodes. And we're animating number 7 right now, episode 7. Each book equals one episode, and so we're looking at being complete with having a complete animated series by probably late 2023 now. So it's just been amazing seeing it all come together, and it's so much fun to see these characters in the books now coming to life in animation.
Well, spectacular. Will the squirrels have moving animated limbs?
Of course they do. Oh yeah. Of course they will, and it's in a different animated style too. So
Yes.
Veggietales obviously was CGI. This we're doing squirrels in traditional animation. So they're just traditional 2D, and it's just a fun look, and just love the personality we're working. So we're doing each episode is 22 minutes. We're animating 2 minutes of every episode at the college with animation students, like junior and senior animation students. So we're integrating it into their curriculum. They're getting paid to do it. They're getting IMDb credit and making something while they're in college, which is awesome. And then we're partnering with another animation studio in New Zealand to do the bulk of the show. So it's really neat how it's all worked out, and students are benefiting, the school is benefiting, and obviously we're making a show. So it's wonderful.
And do you have a streaming partner yet for the show?
We don't. No. So that's the big announcement. We're talking to folks right now, but we hope to have that announcement in the coming weeks. So but we're excited.
Yeah, well, just to go back to something you said about, starting this out through Kickstarter and then now partnering with a school. A while ago you had talked about breakthrough technologies at the time of the early 90s,
Yes.
being able to distribute directly on VHS through the mail instead of
Yep.
going through TV networks, getting around the gatekeepers with these kind
Yeah.
of technologies. And it now sounds like you're finding a new way to do that, both through the fundraising, which I know you said it kind of went a different way,
Yeah.
but then now through streaming and then this university. So I think this is such a great lesson for all Christian creators, just to look for those ways around the gatekeepers, because
Yeah.
the gates are going up higher and higher in culture in a lot of ways, but
Right.
the Lord always makes a way. So
Oh,
I
he
love how you're doing that.
absolutely has, and it's just it's so neat to see it at work, because even with Veggietales, after we made it, we look back, there were so many things that you know we a rational business person at the outset of it would say that would never work, and in fact, when we were trying to raise money, it's like, what, vegetables telling Bible stories? Are you crazy, right? And so that's not any kind of business model. And now, and that business was built off a home video model, which doesn't exist anymore, really, because the shows, they cost so much to make. You need to sell X number of videos to make the business model work. And obviously, that in 2016, which is when I left Big Idea, the reason I left is because there was just no more business left for that. We were spending so much, each of our episodes, was costing near $1 million to make. And, VHS or DVD sales, were just not supporting that. And so there was no more business left. And so, but now it's about streaming. And so how do you raise the money, to make the type of quality content that you need to get on a streaming series to, to make that money back. And so, yeah, so there's a lot of different, pieces of the puzzle that, or it's just, you just, depending on what you have, how you put that together, the folks that come around you, it takes a lot of people giving a lot and a lot of resources to be able to make that happen. And I'm just so grateful and thankful that this one is coming to life.
Well, in addition to the resources being provided in that direction, you also have what seems to me, just from the outside, to be an increasing market demand. Even before some of this recent fracas about Disney, you had a lot of people, evangelical parents as well as just other kinds of parents. They're just looking for more visual and written
Yeah.
entertainment that reflects their values. And speaking
Yeah.
as a gospel believing Christian, I'm interested in material that reflects not only moral values, but actually points to the gospel. Like you were mentioning,
Right.
emphasizing the New Testament and the life of Christ. And like,
Yeah.
I think that that's what we need. It's great to have more common grace emphasis on values that are common to Christianity and other religions. But it's especially great to have that emphasis on Christ and the gospel and his life, death, and ministry.
Yeah.
That's what I really look forward to seeing more of. But at the same time, I'm also encouraged that there's more of a market just for more traditional family values. It kind of feels like it's the 80s and 90s again, but now things are at least technologically different because, as you mentioned, the videotapes have kind of gone away, and then
Yeah.
streaming is next. But you also get a very similar effect where people are able to do this on their own without the gatekeepers, like Zach mentioned.
Yeah, yeah, and and the trick, because you can make anything and put it up on your own YouTube channel and that sort of thing. But then the question becomes, okay, you know, uh, to get to a level of storytelling and a level of quality requires X number of resources to be able to do that. And a 22-minute animated episode requires a lot of people and a lot of resources. And so, you'd have to have a really, and we're not building a YouTube channel to get that audience at this point. That's another model. You can start creating, shorter form content for your own YouTube channel and gain an audience, and then be able to pay for stuff that way. But this model requires a deal with a streamer. So, but I do think we're wired for story, and we want stories that that reflect how we see the world, in ways that are true. And if we can do that in an effective way and be really engaging, I think there's always going to be there's always going to be a need for that. And and I think Christians are getting better about telling stories, and in the craft of telling stories. And so um I want to see that continue, and and that's part of what excites me about teaching. At this phase of my career and life too. It's just that raising that next generation, to tell stories where that assume that there's a God who made us, who loves us, and who wants a relationship with us.
And now it's time for Story Spoilers with Mike Nawrocki, the part of the show where we try to get Mike Nawrocki to give us a story spoiler. Mike, you mentioned that book 11 is coming out for the Dead Sea Squirrels book series. Do you all have a fixed title for that book?
Yes, we do. That title is called A Twisty Turny Journey. So book 11 will be called. We nailed down that title just a few weeks ago, actually. So so it's A Twisty Turny Journey.
Okay,
11.
so we get to announce it here. I'm curious too, at the animated adaptation of the show, about the voice cast. I wonder if you're involved with that, or if y'all are also hiring people from the college department there, or any other notables that might show up in the production that you can reveal.
Yeah. So I'm the voice of Merle Squirrel. So
Okay.
So I do Merle. It's kind of like this, maybe a little squeakier, So I'm Merle Squirrel, and a local Jenny Littleton, who is a local Nashville actress, does the voice for Pearl. And then we have involved because we love at the college I'm part of. We love to integrate all of the departments together, and so we've pulled in. We're working with animation students, but we're also working with musical theater and acting students. So we've pulled in quite a few of them for voice work. And when we did our pilot, we actually cast all students for all the roles, and then the ones that really worked, we kept in those roles, and then we looked out more to professional actors for to kind of fill in the ones that we really needed to. So it's been really great integrating students into that too. So but Michael is played by Jason Marsden, who is a long-term voiceover actor.
Actually, I know that name. Who has he been? Was he in Young Justice? Is he Ninja Turtle?
He was in the Goofy movie. He was
okay.
Yeah, he's done quite a bit of things.
Was he Max in the Goofy movie?
Yeah, he was Max in the Goofy movie, I believe. Yeah,
cool. That's where I recognize him. Okay.
Yeah. So, but just a great actor, and so it's been fun working with him, and then just local professional actors as well. So, but yeah, and it's been now that we're actually completely done with 3 episodes, and we had a screening for cast and crew just a couple nights ago, and just watched the first 3 back to back with cast and crew. It was so cool because the cast had come together so the voice just all the characters are playing off each other so well, and the story came together, and everybody was super excited to see it all starting to come to life.
That's fantastic. Oh, and I love how you said that we're wired for story, and that right there, that's a great illustration of it. That's really what electrifies us. And God's love was told to us through a story. I mean, through an actual event, not just a made up story,
right?
But a real story. And we tell that story to others, but both in its pure essence, just the original form that Paul recounts in 1 Corinthians 15. But then we also adapt that into other stories. And like how you said earlier, that we are proving emotionally that God is real and the Bible is true, because we're told to love God not just with our minds, but with our heart, with our heart and our strength. And so I love that you guys are doing that, and I can't wait to get my younger kids now into these stories. I think they're really going to like these.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. No,
my dog won't like them because he hates all the squirrels.
Yeah, exactly.
This does seem to be a really anti-dog franchise.
Have to have a certain squirrel tolerance. Although my dog seems to like, hold on for a second, it's hiding behind the poster here. I've had to hide these because my dog will find them, and I'll see them walking around with the plush Merle and Pearl in his mouth. It's like
stuffed versions of Merle and Pearl from the Dead Sea Squirrels.
And the cool thing is they've got magnets in their paws, and so they hold hands. Isn't that the cutest thing?
That is so based, Mike. They are in love. They are a good married couple. That's really cool.
love Merle and Pearl, and Pearl's got her own little set of pearls, little pearl necklace on there and everything. So.
And I love Merle's big eyebrows. Is a gentleman with some bushy eyebrows.
Yeah, you got some Merle brows going right there. Yeah.
Merle brows. It now has a hashtag. Congratulations, Zach. Well, speaking of internet marketing, 2-part question for you, Mike, as we draw to a close. First, where can folks find out more about you and the Dead Sea Squirrels on the interwebs? And then in a moment, I'll ask about the Fpea and what you're looking forward to there as well.
Yeah, so we've got a website, deadseasquirrels.com. It's not as robust as we would hope to be. That we're looking at building that up more, but certainly you can find out more about the series there. Link to I've got a website, MikeNawrocki.com. And then, of course, our stuff is available on Amazon to read specifics about the books and order the books.
Okay, and what are you looking forward to in the FPEA conference? We're going to be there at the Realm Makers bookstore again. I'll be there as well as
Yeah.
you, Catherine Jones Payne, James R. Hannibal, a bunch of other authors that we're going to list in the link in our show notes.
I love book signings. I love meeting fans. It is funny because I've done maybe one or two with Squirrels, and more people know. The first one that I did, nobody knew about Squirrels. They knew about Veggietales, but they didn't know about Squirrels. And the second one, I got more folks that I was signing for that were familiar with the series and started to be fans of Dead Sea Squirrels, and so that's fun. And so I'm looking forward to meeting both veggie and squirrel fans and getting to talk to them. And then of course the two talks that I'm giving, how I became an animated cucumber, and then also about incorporating lesson into story. I always I just enjoy talking to folks about my story and what storytelling means to me. So yeah, I'm super excited about the conference.
That's just a great balance of topics right there. Yeah, I can confirm, Mike, although we had a near miss at the conference in Nashville last year, the Teach Them Diligently. We haven't met yet, but we'll meet in Orlando. And we missed you in Pigeon Forge just a few weekends ago. But the Dead Sea Squirrels sell themselves by this point. People cannot get enough of those. Everybody's looking forward to that new book. I get to see just the enjoyment of parents and kids who just love this new series.
Oh, Stephen, thank you so much. I'm so excited. And yeah, it's just neat to see the reaction to it and, folks getting excited about Merle and Pearl and Michael and Justin and, the whole cast. So yeah, looking forward to meeting you in person.
Everybody needs a squirrel. So if they don't have a water buffalo, they better get a squirrel.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Zach, it was a pleasure. Stephen, thank you as well. It's great being here with you guys.
Godspeed, Mike.
Stephen, that was a lot of fun with Mike. I think my kids are really going to love this Dead Sea Squirrels series. We're going on a big road trip this summer, and one of my kids especially gets really car sick. And so I think we're going to have to listen to these stories, and I'll bet they're going to want to listen to them over and over and over again. It sounds super entertaining, so I can't wait.
Yeah, Zach, stuff that Mike Nawrocki makes tends to have that effect of getting played over and over again by kids. I meant to tell him actually about this grievance I have against the Veggietales franchise during a short-lived stint of being an employee at a certain Christian bookstore chain whose physical locations have since closed. Right around this holiday season, there was a Veggietales nativity set. I don't know if you'd ever seen this one.
Oh, yes.
You've heard of this monstrosity, have you? Yeah, you would push the button of the little junior asparagus angel at the top, and it would just shriek out, "Oh, little town of Bethlehem," and it would continue in this manner. What would be even better is if you went across every single item of this toy on the shelf and pressed every single one in rapid succession, and then you have this junior asparagus chorus from the underworld shrieking out about little town of Bethlehem. So it's what happens when you make something that's popular and well loved by kids. It just gets played over and over. We will only play once though through our comm station. So let's go over there, see what holographic messages have arrived. Push some buttons here, clear off some notifications. Here's one from a hero of the Lorehaven Guild, the Discord server, where we are going through right now for our book quest in the month of May. Maxine Justice, Galactic Attorney. We also share each episode of the podcast. And one hero of the guild really enjoyed episode 112. That's the one about how do we love our enemies, even if we are called to defeat them. And this person said, quote, absolutely loved this episode and how you used story to wrestle with loving your enemy instead of philosophizing about it. End quote. That was exactly our point there. It is not easy to love your enemy. I really resent it when Christians act like it is, and all you have to do is be winsome and it's going to be easy somehow. No, it's not, because your relationship to your enemy will vary often based on your calling and your relationship to that person. I like philosophy about this sort of thing, but sometimes you just need to step back and try to wrestle through this using stories, which we tried to do. I think it was really fun to go through Star Wars and Spider-Man. and Man of Steel, and ask, how did those heroes love their enemies? So really appreciate that encouragement there, oh hero of the guild.
Well, and we got another great message in the mailbag. This is from DT Powell, who found our podcast recently as a new listener, and says, quote, I know I'm about 2 years late on this one, but I was so glad to find this episode. And DT Powell is talking about episode 14, what if Jesus promised to redeem not just people and creation, but also fantastic stories? And the message continues, quote, a fictional character is the reason I'm sitting here right now. God used him to show me things about myself I never would have otherwise seen. That was 19 years ago, and that moment has had such an effect on me in my life that I would actually consider that character to be an old and cherished friend. End quote. This was so fun to get this and to think about that. And yeah, just to think about how God uses these characters in our lives, almost like they're real people, or like a dream of a dream or a memory of a memory. And so I love the sentiment here. I love this story that God worked through a story and brought this person to Christ.
Next on Fantastical Truth, as graduations loom, plus summer vacations, or mostly working vacations like the one I'm about to do in Orlando, we are planning the best topics and guests for a possible summer bookbuster season of episodes here on Fantastical Truth. And from there, I think we are going to check in with that series within a series that we've done called Armies of the Aliens. There was a recent dust up in Washington, D.C., where they were talking about unmanned aerial phenomena, or unidentified aerial. Zach, what's the new?
Unidentified aerial phenomena.
Unidentified aerial phenomena. Yeah, they love them some acronyms there, especially if it's a new, fresh, and exciting one. We all just got used to UFO, but now we got to call it UAPs. Anyway, there was a meeting about that. We have naturally got to talk about that here on the podcast. So perhaps we will discover a fun plot twist about that one, that the only way to defeat invading aliens is homeschooling. That's how I'd like to see that episode go. But we'll have to see what we get into when we explore that, only after talking about the conference. We'll have some other guests coming up for you here on the podcast. Meanwhile, you too, like our last reader there about episode 14, may have benefited from teaching by way of fictional characters. The ones that Mike Nawrocki has made have been singing vegetables and talking squirrels who have somehow been preserved by Dead Sea salt over 2,000 years, only just arrived in the 21st century to talk to us about the New Testament. Either way, let's not feel silly about that. You can sing a silly song, but don't feel silly that way. Let's just embrace that. We know that Jesus uses these fantastical creations, zany and otherwise, to teach us more about himself and moral virtue and the way to accept him and look forward to life with him forever as we continue to seek and find his fantastical truth.